This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 494, AI and EDU. On today's show, we're talking about AI and EDU, how it can provide efficiencies, and how you might start using it today with our guests, Brian Piper and Mike Miles. We'll also cover external entities as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guests today are Brian Piper and Mike Miles. Brian is an author, international keynote speaker, and consultant. Brian has been optimizing digital content since 1996, and he chairs the Marcom AI Committee and is on the AI Council at the University of Rochester and is the host of the AI for You podcast. I have to ask, is that you university or you as in the collective?
It
Okay,
is
university.
U University, yes.
Mike Miles is a web engineer with 20 plus years of experience and has been working with Drupal since 2009. As the director of web development at MIT Sloan, Mike manages the team responsible for the development, maintenance, and growth of public facing web properties for the school. Mike presents talks at technical conferences around the world and is one of the organizers of the New England Drupal camp. Brian and Mike, welcome to the show and thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
I'm Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development, and today my co-hosts are Andrew Barry, VP of Technology at Lullabot.
Hello, everyone. I am happy to be here.
And joining us for the whole episode today, Martin Anderson Kluth, Senior Solutions Engineer at Acquia.
Hello, internet friends.
And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin, a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted to connect your Drupal website to an external data source to include their data sets into the presentation of your Drupal managed content? There's a module for that. It's called External Entities, and it was created in May of 2015 by user Addicts, although the most recent release is by Colin Schwartz, a fellow Canadian. It has versions 8.x-2.0 beta 1 and 3.0.0 beta 4. Versions available, the latter of which supports Drupal 10 and 11. It is actively maintained. In fact, the latest release was less than a month ago. It does technically have security coverage, though it needs a stable release. It also has test coverage and a pretty extensive user guide. It has 77 open issues, 3 of which are bugs against the 3.x branch, though one of those is already marked as fixed, which is all pretty good considering the site is officially in use by 679 sites according to Drupal.org. Now, the external entities module lets you map fields from external data sources to fields on a virtual entity in Drupal. This allows for external data to be used with Drupal's powerful features like views, entity queries, or search API, as well as your local Drupal site's theme to theme data from an external source. The module does provide a time-based caching layer for external entities, but you can also implement a more custom cache expiration logic through custom code. External entities can also have annotations, essentially Drupal managed information that will be associated with the external entity and accessed as a normal field through all of the Drupal field operations. This could allow you to have Drupal-based comments on the information from a different website, for example. There is a sizable ecosystem of companion modules to help you to connect to different kinds of external storage, as well as to help you aggregate data from multiple sources. In my Drupal career, I've worked on a number of higher education websites, and the ability to display externally managed data is pretty common, either from an HRIS system to show staff and faculty data or a courseware solution like Banner. So I thought this would be an interesting tangent to today's topic. Let's talk about external entities.
Yeah, this is a great module. I want to pause for a second and talk about their icon though. I don't know if you saw it. It's like a squid or a Drupal octopus. It's definitely pretty cool. As for the module itself, I could have used this back in 2010 when I was building some distributed higher ed sites. And it's not even just the courseware staff that want to be shared. There's always like little pieces of content that either, if a professor gets their own site that they want to share between their courses or, um, their syllabi or something. And it's just, you know, if this works as it says, which I believe it does, it seems like a really convenient way to kind of manage that. And then you're not you're not duplicating all that code with some sort of, you know, expensive migration operation that's happening nightly or hourly or something. It's just pulling in the cache data. So it seems uh pretty niche, but really powerful.
I remember you actually using this module, I wanna say, like, 2016 for a client back when I was in digital marketing, and like, most of the content we had to pull in through an API, and this worked really well to allow us to handle like any other entities in the system. I forget what the website was for, but it worked pretty well when I used it back then. I think that was like Drupal 8, so
Yeah, I've worked on a lot of projects that have done this sort of thing using the migrate module, which, like anything else, has its pros and cons. One of the things I'm curious about is, does anyone know if there's a way to integrate this with media entities? Because I would probably say that like 3/4 of the external integrations that I've seen on our projects end up going into the media system because you're integrating with some custom DAM or something like that. And I couldn't tell if it only worked with like from the ground up custom entity types, or if you could do something like map it to a node content type or a media type or a taxonomy type.
So the project page does specifically call out that one of the differences between versions 2 and 3 is native support for files and images. So I suspect that it does have that ability to use those kinds of data as well. I would suspect that there's an ability to map those, or to, I guess, in some way, probably reference maybe from a media entity, one of those virtual entities that ultimately has data that's from that external source. But it would probably need someone who can speak to a higher level of experience with the module than I have to kind of answer that more authoritatively in terms of how you'd want to set that up.
I really like the options for caching because that's definitely a pain point when you're doing any sort of integration like this. And I've known some of the from an editorial standpoint, the best solutions are ones where the external system somehow tells your Drupal site, "Hey, this content changed, immediately update," like what Drupal does with its internal caching system. And the fact that you're not just stuck with time-based caching, but can write something totally custom, feels like a pretty smart architectural decision by the authors.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of looking at this module was the potential impact that using something like this could have on sort of the data source in terms of the number of times it could be queried. And I think, I've certainly worked on projects where the customer's IT team really wanted us to have the data reside only in their own sort of application, and then once the public facing website went live, they realized that their system was not at all built to handle the level of queries that actually creates on sort of the dependent data source system. And so, yeah, having this kind of a data caching strategy, I think, is a huge upside for sure.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Martin. As always, you have an on-topic module of the week. If folks wanted to connect or suggest a module of the week, what's the best way for them to do that?
We're always happy to talk about candidates for module of the week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as Man Clue on all of the Drupal and social channels.
On May 2nd, we are recording episode 500. We have a special guest planned, and that would be you. If you are interested in being on episode 500, you can visit talkingdrupal.com/show 500 to learn more. Everyone is welcome. Remember, that's May 2nd. All right. Moving on to our primary topic. Uh, Brian, I think today's show came from a talk that you delivered at Evolving Drupal in New York City last year. Can you give us kind of a high level overview of how you and your team are using AI?
Yeah, so it's mostly on the content creation, distribution, and optimization side. So we are using a variety of different tools really to do audience analysis, audience assessment. So we've built virtual personas. So we've figured out who our, ideal customer profiles are. We build them in ChatGPT. We created these custom chatbots out of those so that now we can go bounce content ideas off of them. We can have them go look at existing content, figure out where there's gaps in the content, make recommendations for things that would be most relevant or impactful for them. So it kind of starts at the ideation, the content creation, like coming up with the ideas, brainstorming ideas, figuring out what's going to be most relevant to them. We load in a bunch of Google Search Console data, things like that to see what sort of terms they're searching on. And then we roll into the distribution process because we know that you can't just create content on your website anymore and do some SEO and expect everybody to find it. Especially, we're targeting Gen Z, Gen Alpha. They're searching differently. They're searching in voice and social and AI. So we've really got to figure out how to leverage, all the content that we have on our website and figure out how to redistribute that and repurpose and retarget that. So we're using AI a lot to help us with that. And then the data analysis and the optimization part of it is huge. So you look and you see what content's performing well, what's not. We have much more success having AI look at our data than having us look at our data because it can look at a lot more data. It can make connections that we can't see all the time. So we'll have the tool. We've got different custom GPTs that are built to look at, our strategic priorities, our, different programs that we're trying to promote, and then to go through and look at all the content that we have to see what's performing well, what keywords we're ranking for, and where we might be able to leverage, existing content we have or create new content to fill in the gaps. So AI has like really transformed our entire content creation process, but almost, every step of what we're doing so far is using tools that are external to the environment that we're working in. So we're working outside of the CMS. So, when you start looking at the way that, Drupal is integrating AI into the CMS, it seems like there are so many more opportunities and possibilities for kind of getting a big picture view of all of your content and really being able to narrow into, specific areas of focus that are a little more difficult to do, a little more cumbersome with all these different external tools that we have. So like we even have tools for creating alt tags and meta descriptions
Okay.
for our content, which are great. They save us a lot of time, but it would be more convenient for all of our editors, content creators, if those tools were built into our CMS.
How about you, Mike? How is your team at MIT using AI today?
Different from how Brian and his team are using it, because we don't use it for content at all at MIT Sloan. But what my team, specifically the web development team, right now we mainly use it to help aid in our code creation. Like we use GitHub Copilot with VS Code, so that is very helpful in terms of when we have to write, like custom classes and services, and it can read all of our code base for us and help make suggestions. It doesn't always get it right, but it saves a bunch of time. Um, and we found it beneficial for also in terms of like trying to understand what's going on. So the people on my team have different levels of experience in Drupal and with our code base. We also have a WordPress website we manage, which we don't touch as much. So that's more of a closed system from us that, is a little bit murkier of what it does. So using things like Copilot or even like ChatGPT or say the Drupal droid on ChatGPT, we can ask the questions and be like, how can we accomplish X, Y, and Z and start the ball rolling on ideas on what we can do has been the most helpful. But yeah, right now it's mainly helping with code generation and, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I will throw in just to clarify, we're not having AI create the content for us. We're just using it to ideate, to generate brainstorms, to look for gaps, to do some editing. But our writers are the ones that are actually creating the original content based on the insights that they get from, the recommendations they get from the AI, which sometimes they take and sometimes they don't. Um, but the repurposing, taking the existing content, restructuring it for different audiences on different channels. It's really good at that. And then the data analysis piece and the optimization piece has really revealed some opportunities for us to find um, more effective, make our content more effective, more efficient.
I, I'm curious, before we move on, Brian, I'm curious how, I mean, obviously you have the policies in place and that kind of stuff, but how are you confirming or quantifying that your writers aren't using AI for the actual generation piece, right? I mean, obviously, on some level, there needs to be some trust, but when you are, is it sounds like there's a difference in policies, and we'll get into the policies in a moment at MIT and Rochester, where MIT just blanket is saying we're not using AI for content. Period. You are using it for generating alt text. It sounds like from scratch. But how are you making sure that that policy is being followed um, for your content writers?
Yeah, and it's a combination of things. So it's mostly through education and awareness to let them know that, there are risks of using the content directly from the tools. Even if you're just getting ideas from the tools, you still need to go validate those and verify those, go check the sources because the tools will hallucinate. They will make things up. Um, Most of our content creators are, I would say, AI hesitant, which does help the process because they enjoy the writing process. They enjoy, the original thought and the stories that go into that. And we really try to focus as much as we can on, student stories, faculty stories, which are much more difficult to generate with AI. But we do tell our content creators you can use what is generated by AI. You just have to be transparent with that within the
Okay.
content. So if they use an image, if they create an image in Midjourney and then they want to use that in their article, that's okay. You just have to be sure that you give credit to Midjourney and you say that this is an AI generated article. If you want to add, a summary or bullets to your news story that you're creating and you want AI to generate those, that's fine, but you just have to say at the bottom, these bullets were created by ChatGPT. And I
Okay.
think letting people know that, we're not it's not that we're saying you can't do it. We're just saying you have to be transparent about how you're using it. We don't want you to try to deceive our audiences and say, "Here's this great story," and then you didn't actually write the story, so your name shouldn't be attributed to the story.
Eh,
And then in our policies, it does, we have guidelines for different domains across the institution, different areas across the institution to help guide people on how to use the tools and what to be aware of. And then we do monthly sessions where we just get together and we talk about risks and use cases. We get a lot of feedback during those. We get a lot of people who will ask questions about, I extended this video clip by 10 seconds using AI. Do I have to say that? Where's the cutoff? Because it's a really gray area right now as far as like how much does AI have to take part in something before you have to credit it for that?
Yeah, I think that's where it's starting to get really murky. Because yeah, if you it's one thing to go to, like, ChatGPT and be like, "Hey, help me with this thing." Obviously, I used it, but even tools, I mean, I don't personally use Grammarly, but a lot of people do, and like, every tool like that is adding AI. If I'm writing something in, like, we're in Google Docs right now, and there's been suggestions and grammar corrections there forever, but I'm sure they're starting to put AI into that too. Like, where does what defines using AI is starting to become a little bit difficult to track too. So, it's interesting to hear, how you're handling that.
I think some of those policies that Brian mentioned, I mean, MIT has a lot of similar ones in terms of generating content, especially in higher ed. They're important because when someone goes to a higher ed website, like we're a source of truth for something, right?
Mhm.
We're an institute that people are trusting that information. So if you're using hallucinations of content, that's a bad thing. That's a very bad thing for anybody. But I think definitely at higher ed, it's really bad. So MIT has a lot of similar policies. If you're going to generate content with AI, be very transparent on what AI generated and what part of it was provided by AI, and double check everything. Like you're not allowed to do like research related content using generative AI, because research has to be very, very accurate.
I'm curious, Mike, are there any policies your team has come up with or has to follow, like specifically on the development and engineering side? And have you found that they've helped with using AI tools or that they've gotten in the way somehow?
So it's interesting. A lot of the AI policies at MIT, which are publicly available, if you search MIT AI policy, you can find our AI guidance page that the Central Institute put out. It's mainly focused on faculty and instructors and students and how they use AI. So like when my team, when we wanted to use GitHub Copilot, like I reached out to the IT team and be like, "Hey, this isn't on your approved list. Here's what we want to use it for. Here's our use case," because it's very different than the general policies. So it hasn't inhibited us too much. Luckily, MIT has a lot of connections with groups in,
Mhm.
organizations and businesses that produce AI, and they have agreements. So we can use a lot of the tools that are already available for faculty or students. It's just how we use it is a bit different. So I always try to be like upfront and be like, hey, this is how the dev team wants to use it. You haven't really thought about, about this because there's not many developer teams at MIT. So is it okay that we do this? And it hasn't inhibited us at all so far.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned something about like approved tools and so on. Was there a process for evaluating like the value of any of the AI tools? Like, did you have to do any sort of work to quantify how much Copilot was helping or not? Because I can certainly say from our experience at Lullabot, there's huge variation between different AI tools where some of them are like you couldn't pay me to use it. And there are others where it's like, you know, you can take it from my cold dead hands kind of value from it. And I'm curious, like, what sort of process either one of you went through that way when in selecting different AI tools?
I would say for my team again, say with using GitHub Copilot, yeah, we in the I guess application process of submitting to be like, are we okay to use this? It's really based on the type of data you're going to be providing the AI tools, and then the reputation, I guess, of those AI companies. But MIT organizes its data in many different classifications. So there could be like low risk content, high risk, medium risk. And so like high risk would be like classified research stuff. Like that's not allowed to go out to AI tools because it's a third party service that you can't give it to. But my content, like when I say we're working on the website code, the code doesn't actually go anywhere. It just produces a web page that then has publicly accessible content. That's very low risk. So I have a low barrier to entry to say, yes, I can use this because I'm not feeding any classified high risk information to third party systems. I don't know about Brian's process though.
Yeah, it's very similar in a lot of ways. So anytime that we want to use a new tool, and it's different depending on which domain is looking to use those tools. So our AI council is made up of 5 different domains. There's Marcom, clinical, research, academic, and administrative.
Oh,
So if the research or clinical groups want to get a new tool approved, they have a much more stringent process that they have to go through because the data that they're going to be using, like Mike said, it's, that medium or high risk data, much more critical that that stays secure, that that doesn't get out into these tools. In Marcom, most of the data that we're using is low risk. It's publicly available. It's things that anybody with, an SEO tool can find out about where we rank, for different keywords and things like that. But when we wanna look at integrating a new tool, we go through a pilot process where we'll, propose a specific workflow that we wanna integrate a tool or a set of tools into. We'll kind of measure the time and effectiveness of the current state of that workflow, and then we'll integrate the tools into that workflow. We'll let people use the tools for, you know, until they get comfortable with them. Usually it's a week or 2 once they kinda go through the cycle a handful of times, and then we'll start measuring the performance improvement, based on, using the tool versus not using the tool. And some of our like, most of our workflow processes that we've done these pilot projects with so far have shown, like, a time savings anywhere from, like, I think 28 to 43% And then we've actually seen an improvement in the performance of the content once it goes out and once we've optimized it, up to 28%
Well,
higher performing content. So once we kind of get the numbers back, then we can go back to IT, and yeah, it's actually the domain that does the vetting for the tools within their specific area of request. And then those go through a shorter process at the end with IT and legal, just to make sure that everything is, buttoned up on that side of things from a security standpoint and a legal standpoint. And then we can start integrating the tools into our workflows.
so I'm curious how you guys are handling, or your organizations are handling, the ingestion side, because you've mentioned that you kind of classify content in different ways. But I'm curious about this from kind of two perspectives. One is, I have a particular goal that I'm trying to achieve, whether to rewrite a page or write some custom functionality. How are you providing that content to whatever LLM that you're using? And then the other side is organization organization wide. How are you guys handling AI bots scraping your institutions? Because for my clients, that's becoming a bigger issue. Like, when it was just ChatGPT, I don't think a lot of people noticed that they were scraping, but starting with Claude and a couple of others, I don't know how to put this. They're just not good citizens.
Mhm.
They decide they want your data, and then they send 15,000 requests a second at your website. And then, if you're on a CPU limited server, your site goes down. If you're on a usage based server, you get a hefty bill for the privilege of being scraped by the AI bot. So I'm curious about those two. Maybe Mike, we can start with your team. Like, how are you guys handling those two situations?
I mean, we haven't had to deal with it too much. At least I haven't seen any traffic spikes to our website getting scraped by AI tools. So yeah, I'm not sure because we haven't had to really deal with that too much. Obviously, our content's been collected because it's publicly available. Um, but that's an interesting question because we're doing research into how we want to leverage AI more into our website, and part of that is being able to give our content up to an AI tool, specifically like for a RAG model to be able to use. So I didn't even think about think about the impact it has on how much it has to scrape our content and what that might do um, to our site. But yeah, I haven't had to deal too much with that so far. I don't know if Brian has since he's more on the Marcom side.
Yeah, I mean, initially you talked about like how we're sharing content that we're working on. So if it's a story that's going to go up on our news site or something like that, we're okay with uploading it into the tools to have it look at, style guide, um, uh, whether or not it's adhering to our style guidelines or branding guidelines and stuff like that. We've got different custom GPTs that help with that. Um, and we're not worried about, the story leaking out before we're ready to publish it because it's usually pretty quickly on into the process before we're, ready. Once we go from the editing to the actual publishing is pretty quick. And then, sometimes if there is content that we're working on for like a grant or something like that, we have a lockdown, closed environment that we can also use for the medium and high risk data that's on site, um, using a API. So we'll use that tool depending on the level of, kind of data that's in the content that we're working on. And then from a, um, AI traffic standpoint, we're fine with it. We we want the AI bots to come and scrape our sites because we know that people are searching in AI. So we are intentionally trying to target AI engines and models with the content that we create because we want to answer, the specific questions that our users are asking, and we want to create the best answers for those questions so that they will show up on ChatGPT and hopefully will get cited. Whether or not people, come to the site, we are seeing increased traffic from the different AI tools. We're monitoring the amount of traffic that we do get from the various tools. It hasn't gotten to a point yet where we need to start thinking about server load or anything like that. I'm sure, if it does start getting to that point, we'll have to add that into our considerations. But at this point, we're fine with getting the having our content being scraped, as long as it's just the public content that's out there. We want that to get indexed. We want that to show up in AI search, voice search, and we're
Yeah,
actually changing our SEO strategy to really focus more on those questions that people ask in voice or in AI
interesting.
versus just kind of the keyword searches that we historically would target for Google SEO.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective because one of the things that I've been reading about a little bit more and considering more lately is like the shift in SEO. I mean, it used to be SEO, right? I'm surprised it hasn't become a ASEO.
EO, yeah, there's all sorts of different EO, yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is, when people searched on Google, yeah, the vast majority clicked on only the first one and didn't look anywhere else. But if they were clicking there, they were going to the site. And if they didn't find what they needed, they had the opportunity for alternative. Whereas with AI search tools, generally, it's like it's presented as this is the answer, right? Now, if there's broad consensus that there's two options, AI will sometimes be like, oh yeah, you could go this way or this way. But if there isn't, if you're the one that's picked as the correct answer, they're presenting, Rochester as the one that has the answer, and that's what people will see. People won't even see like, "Hey, Rochester for some reason, Rochester has one answer on this, and all these other schools have 500 answers that are, give more nuance." Like, they just see that one answer. And so I think I my clients, I think, are starting to shift towards that too, because it's like, it's more important. Like, if you d it used to be like, if you were 2nd or 3rd, yeah, your traffic would be a lot lower than 1st. If you're not 1st on, you know, if you're not 1st on ChatGPT, you don't exist. Um, and I think that that's gonna be interesting to see how strategies change around that.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing decreased organic traffic to our site as people are switching, more to searching on social and more to searching using AI and searching using voice. And I think this is a case where hallucinations actually work for us. People know that these tools make things up, so they wanna go validate the source. So people are clicking on our links within AI tools to make sure that it's a legitimate article that, ChatGPT is returning as part of the answer.
Yeah.
Whether or not they dwell on the page or go to other pages on the site or not, that's on us to make those pages that they land on, as relevant and as have the content be as impactful to them as possible.
One thing I wanted to just chime in on the question of the negative potential impacts of AI crawlers. There is a Drupal module called Crawler Rate Limit that you can use to potentially enforce those. So, effectively, if an AI bot is asking more often than, let's say, what you have in your robots.txt, then it can automatically send a 429 response code, which basically says, hey, you're asking for these things too often. And I feel like the way a lot of those are engineered, probably they'll pretty quickly learn that they have to actually respect the specified
Yeah.
rate, and that can be sort of a potential way, at least to avoid it bringing your site down, at least while it's crawling. So wanted to throw that in there as sort of a, a module of the week way to potentially address that kind of a problem. But Brian, what are some of your favorite tips and tricks to incorporate AI into the work that your team does?
Yeah, and I always tell people AI integration is not a technology project, it's a change management project. We've worked with different teams where we've come in and, looked at their workflow and created a couple of custom GPTs to solve a problem or showed them how they could use AI to solve a problem. And they love it like while we're showing them and while we're doing it. And then when they leave the room, they go right back to the way that they've always done things because that's what they know and it's built into their workflow. So when we do these pilot projects, we're really focused on staying on top of, usually they're like a 3-month project, and we usually spend the first 2 weeks, like, regularly checking in with the team and asking them what's working, what's not, what's the response back, how is AI helping you, what challenges are you facing? So I think you've really gotta be embedded, at least initially, until they start getting used to that process. They start getting used to thinking about their work differently, And then, by the time you get to the end of that 3 months, it's fascinating to see the changes in people because instead of now just thinking, well, now I'm just going to go use this tool to do this one thing. Now they start actually thinking about the entire workflow and why are we doing it this way? Maybe now we've got, maybe now we can build an agent that can take care of the first half of this entire workflow and that can step through these like 6 different custom GPTs that we're using piecemeal throughout this process. Um, so that's where we're saying this really is change management. You have to start thinking differently about why you're doing your work the way you're doing it. And typically it's been like the tools kind of constrain us along the way, but AI is giving us opportunities to really kind of re-examine those processes. So it's been an interesting migration.
Very interesting. So, to what degree have you also experimented with sort of, in some cases, like building AI tools directly into, like, let's say, a website CMS so that it actually becomes integrated into the workflow itself?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the ideal next step, and we haven't done any of that. Basically, everything that we've been doing is with, using the external tools and then, marrying them up to the site. So that's one of the things we're looking forward to with, migrating into the Drupal environment, with more of our sites is really having that ability to, use those embedded tools. And we're seeing it in all the tools that we use are all adding AI to their tools. I mean, Adobe, Salesforce, everybody now has AI within their tools, which is which is great, but also a lot of them are kind of launching those features without letting you know, which is, tough from security standpoint, data standpoint. And the fact that now everyone has access to these tools that doesn't really know how to use them or prompt them or what data they should or shouldn't put in. Um, so that can be a little tricky. And then a lot of times, those tools, the way that they integrate the AI doesn't give you as much capability as you would have if you created a custom version that's really trained on your data, your content, your, brand. So yeah, I mean, ideally having the tools embedded, having the AI embedded in the CMS would be fantastic.
You mentioned using AI to distribute content outside of your website to social and other destinations. I'm curious, like, could you just talk more about what that workflow looks like? Because I mean, I'm sure listeners have some ideas of maybe how they could do it, but it's also maybe not as clear as generating code with AI or using it as an ideas partner.
Yeah, and that's really so we have different custom GPTs set up for different social channels that are trained on, the way we write on that specific channel and who the audience is on that channel, who we're specifically trying to target or which audiences we're trying to target on that channel. So when we find that we have a particular piece of content that's working well on our website or within a newsletter or something like that, something that's driving traffic, people seem to be interested in it. We will start with that content that we know is working for us already. And then we'll ask, the different custom GPTs, we'll say, create, 10 different LinkedIn posts from this piece of original content. It'll generate 10 posts. Then our social media team will kind of pick and choose what they like, what they don't like. So it makes it quicker for them to kind of scale up, one or two social posts out of what ChatGPT gives them. The same thing, like, create a 30-second TikTok script. It'll create 5 scripts. We'll give those to our social media interns. They'll read through the scripts to kind of get an idea of what the content should be, what the story is they're trying to communicate. And then they'll record those in their own voice, and then we can distribute those out. So it's basically, looking at what's working on one channel and figuring out how to repurpose that for other channels, for other audiences, and at the same time making sure that the tools are all trained to optimize for hashtags or discoverability so that when someone's searching on, TikTok for University of Rochester, all of our posts are all, appropriately tagged and targeted towards them.
So you're really using it to apply different content style guides based off of the channel that you're reaching out to.
Exactly. Yep.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second as a user. How do we how do we social media already is at a volume that is unsustainable long term. I mean, it's been like that for years. Now that AI is in the mix, as you mentioned, like it sounds like you're increasing the volume of certain posts by 5 or 10 times, which you kind of, it's arms race. You kind of have to, because if you're not, then you're not keeping up with people that are, right? You just won't show up as often. How, how do we make this sustainable? Let's solve the world's problems today. How do we make this sustainable for people that are that are just using social media as a tool and not it's not a job, I guess.
So it's a great question, and, they say that, I think what it is by the end of 2030, 95% or 99% of the content online is all gonna be AI generated, so that's terrifying to think of, just because the scale that it
Yeah.
can we'll still be creating the same amount of content, but AI will be able to scale, much broader than that. So when I say we're having the tool create 5 different posts, we're not posting all of those. So we're not actually increasing the number of posts that we're making on social. We're just trying to really increase the quality of the posts. We're trying to increase the targeting of the post so that our content that's out there is the best content that's out there. So we're using AI to help, like, amplify our creative. We're not using it to scale our creative, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I'm glad I asked. I'm glad you clarified because because I think that that's a great approach. I don't think that that's the approach that most companies or people are taking, unfortunately. Just look at YouTube nowadays, and the amount of AI-generated videos. I think using it to increase quality is great. The problem is people are using it to increase quantity, and it's already causing problems with a lot of long-running projects. Like, I think I might have mentioned this on the show before, but there was a really interesting linguistics study that would periodically, basically just grab a bunch of content on the internet, look at it, and see trends in language. Like, what words are people using? What contractions are becoming common? Those kinds of things. And due to AI generated content on the internet, that's just not viable anymore. A year and a half in, they've just killed the project because they can't differentiate now between what people are using and what is being generated because that's the big thing about about generated content. It's a great equalizer. It generates to the median, right? If you're keeping experts in the loop, you can use it to kind of broaden and increase quality, but most people aren't using it that way. They're just saying expand these bullet points into 3,000 words, let me post it. And 10 threads on Twitter.
Yeah, and
um,
that's one of the things we keep trying to focus on is start with original content, start with human stories, human generated content, which is good now. But, I mean, it's not gonna be long before, like, you're gonna go on YouTube and you're gonna see talking heads. I mean, it's not gonna be long before we could all be AI avatars having AI conversations, and no one would be able to tell. I mean, the technology is getting that good now. So I think it's gonna make in-person events much more relevant, because people are gonna want to connect with those human experts, and you're always gonna be wondering when you're online, is Martin really sitting there, or is he a AI avatar? Not that I ever
well,
think any of you would replace yourself with an AI avatar, but the technology is gonna be there very soon.
not I.
Yet, I mean, you've got those use cases like generating a voice for people who can no longer speak, where it's like halfway in between. I think there's going to be like what happens when people get together in person, being like, we want to get away from everything that's AI generated, but people are using AI to overcome some personal difficulty that makes that difficult for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of
There's
ethical issues around AI. Sure.
yeah, there's some deep questions here. So Mike, shifting back to how your team and how you're using AI. So as a kind of a manager of developers, how do you have any tips for people that are thinking about integrating AI into their team and how to do that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to remember, I mean, these AI tools are amazing, but they're tools, and just like anything, you need practice with them to be really good at using them. It's not going to solve your problems, right? Hammers aren't going to build a house for you. You have to know what you're doing. So with these tools, if you want your team to use them very well, you have to give them time to play with them and experiment with them and discover them and try them out. So I try to put that out to my team when we were first using some AI tools to integrate into our development workflow, which is like, just play with them, just get a sense for what they can do, what they can't do, read up on it, but play with it before we actually try to use it. And that's the most important thing as a tip for being a manager is like letting your team explore and experiment. um, you're not going to release the first thing you do with AI, say the first code you generate with AI out to your live site. Hopefully not. At least you have like a human approval process and review process, but getting a sense of what they can do, what you have to feed the systems to get what you're looking for is going to make your development team better at using these tools, just like anything, just like any sort of training you get for learning how to write code in Drupal, for example, right? You need the time and experience to do it. You're not going to be great at it right out the get go. So giving your team the space to explore and experiment, especially there's so many new tools coming out all the time. It's rapid of especially in the development space. So being up on it and continually not getting stuck with like this is the one tool we use. It's like, well, what else is out there? What can you switch to and keep experimenting with things. That's my number one piece of advice is don't be afraid to let your team experiment.
I'm curious how you've seen EDUs using AI other than as assistive technologies. So, are there any examples of EDU orgs doing cool things out there? Any use of AI that's really public facing?
I guess one question is, what defines assistive technologies versus not when what you're using AI for? I know like a well-known use case in the Drupal space is the Yale Sites team. They built their own RAG model that, I mean, they use some third-party tools, but they plug it all together. And it's mainly for students, and I think it's internal only, so students can ask their custom chatbot, like, "Where can I find vegan pizza on campus?" And it can provide them information that way. So is that assistive though? Because it's helping them. That's a good question. And I know other universities, I think like Forsyth University, they have augmented their site search. So, and I think this is going to happen a lot, not just free to use. And so you can go on their website and use their traditional like keyword search, but you can type in a question and be like, "Hey, what programs do you offer?" And it has a nice little modal that pops up. They use a third party tool from Element 451, which is a company that produces an AI CRM, and it'll provide the answers and links to the pages on the website to find more information. So I know I'm looking into that, and I think more universities will look into that because that's going to the way people interact with those tools shapes how we have to build our content, right? How specifically with search, how we're going to build our search experience. People are like, make it work like Google. People are going to be like, make it work like ChatGPT, and we want to deliver that because that's what users expect.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole, great podcast out there about, some excellent, AI integrations into higher ed,
What would the
um,
name of that be?
AI for you. Um, but, I mean, there's some fantastic integrations, Foresight Tech, along with their searches also, they've created a whole chatbot system on their site, which is also all RAG fed. Basically, it will pass you from chatbot to chatbot based on the questions that you're asking. So if you have
Hmm,
a finance question and then you want to go into, a housing question, it will just say, "Oh, well, let me get, Dave for you," and Dave will answer that question. And then if it gets to the point where the chatbot can't answer the question, they'll pass you on to a human, representative. Um, but they have saved so much time by having all of those kind of basic high level questions answered by the chatbots. So their total number of calls to their, actual human customer center has gone down significantly, but the time that they get to spend answering the more complicated questions has increased. So it's actually, we're always talking about on the show, we're always talking about the fact that AI in a lot of ways can create more human connections because you get to spend more time engaging with people versus, doing all the repetitive, routine, monotonous tasks
yeah.
that you have to do as part of your job. Ivy Tech Community College actually integrated kind of an AI watching system into all of their student behavior programs so they can see if a student starts missing class or if their grades start dropping. And then it'll try to match them up with the right counselor for them who will then reach out to them personally. And they had a 95% success rate in taking students that were on the verge of failing out and making them C or higher students.
Oh, wow.
So there's a ton of opportunities out there and different ways to, integrate these tools into higher ed. And I mean, on the teaching and learning side, that's a whole nother. I mean, some of the things that our business school is doing with AI is just fascinating to hear how they're integrating it into the class and really, I mean, because students are going to need to know how to use AI in whatever job they get into. So I think that institutions that aren't integrating that into the classrooms are really doing their students a disservice.
I so I just had a revelation based on something you were talking about, and one of the things that's always been interesting, and Mike, you alluded to this, is clients want Google for their search, but they don't want to invest the 40 or $50 billion that it takes to become Google. The difference is, though, that Google makes its money by getting people onto their website and advertising to them, among other things. Whereas, we don't really know exactly where the value of AI is going to land, but a lot of them seem to be going towards it's a service you pay to integrate a custom agent onto a site. And so they're investing their tools and making it so that you can customize it and throw it on your site. So getting that kind of customized experience for an individual site, I mean, it still takes work, and Drupal does have a significant advantage here on many fronts. But that is something that might actually be achievable when a client says, "Hey, I want it to work like ChatGPT or like Claude or like, any other number that comes out." You can just switch out the agent powering it on the back end, maybe tweak a couple things, and now your site behaves the same way because it's the same thing underlying it. So I'm interested to see where that goes long term because you might get better experiences long term.
Yeah, I mean, and from the site search, like the internal search Mike was talking about, I mean, we have, our Google powered search on our website. So when things aren't, when our internal search isn't returning the results the way we want them, we have to go optimize the pages for Google to get them to resort on our internal search. And so I know that one of the sessions at the last Evolve Drupal was all talking about the search API within Drupal and the way you can customize the search
Mhm.
results to feature the pages that you want users to find. That's huge.
Yeah.
We track the search traffic within our sites, and so many of the students that come into the site immediately go to the search. They don't even try to look at the navigation or some of the sites that I've worked on doing some consulting will have like 100 items in their menus. Well, I mean, like no one is going to spend time looking for that one item they want to click on. So having that search is just a fantastic add for navigation user experience.
I also think having those tools available that are like consuming your content, if you like integrate the AI onto your website, when you can evaluate what people are asking the AI and what responses they're getting, if they're not getting like great responses, then it's consuming your pages, then that's emphasis for you to go and restructure your pages. Make sure like
Yeah.
the undergrad page like talks about the undergrad programs and it doesn't talk about all these random things that the editors thought were important but make no sense for end users. And so I see it helping in that way of being able to organize your content in a way that makes sense for the AI, but then in turn for people who are going to those end up on those pages and make sure it's all relevant information.
Mm.
You actually, in more revelations, like with Google today, or, for the past, what, 15, 20 years, as a site owner, you can see what people are searching for that causes them to land on your website. But if you are in Chat GPT, you certainly don't have the context of the whole conversation. Uh, you know, I don't think they pass anything from the conversation as far as, refer information or anything like that. Um, do you think there's going to be a push to try to integrate chat like AIs on websites directly and, maybe encourage people to use those more so that you can gain that visibility? Because I'm imagining a site that doesn't do that, if, three-quarters of search moves over to chat, they're gonna have no idea what their users are actually intending when they come to their site.
Yeah.
I think that's actually going on now. One of the companies I mentioned earlier, Element 451, one of their tools, I think it's called Bolt Discovery, and it's that sort of search tool where it's on your website and people ask it questions and it serves up content from your website. That's what it uses for its information. But it has a whole analytics dashboard that you can go into, and you can see, like, it uses AI to generate these statistics, but what keywords people are searching on, what are the most common terms, what sort of questions people are asking, and I see that as very relevant. Like, if I wanted to implement that on my website, because I think our search is one of those black boxes still, where we kind of get a sense of like what filters people are using, but we don't track every search someone does. But if we can go to a dashboard that says most people are asking these sort of questions, then that can help guide what content we want to put an emphasis on because people are looking for it.
Yeah, I think that sort of data is gonna become much more critical as we start losing a lot of that organic search, because now we can look at our digital landscape, and we can see what pages people are entering on and what they're searching on to get there. Once more people, especially in our target audiences, those are the ones that are gonna start using AI search first. I'm not so worried about the, 60-year-old alumni who's out there who's still gonna be going to Google or to Yahoo or, whatever, uh, uh, search term or search channel they wanna go to. But all of our potential students are going to be experimenting with AI search, and, they're gonna come to, you know, discover our university through, an AI answer where we happen to get integrated in as a cited source, and then they're gonna go to our homepage where they're gonna search to find the information they want. Um, so I think it's gonna be more critical for us to start paying attention to those internal search terms as well and see where navigation, I mean, that should inform the way we set up our navigation.
Mike, you mentioned Element 451 as a tool. I'm curious, like, do either of you have like a a top favorite AI tool? And maybe I'm gonna let's exclude ChatGPT and Claude and the big ones, like ones that you think our audience may not have heard of yet.
One that I've only played around with, I haven't used it too much in my day to day, but is builder.io. And they have a couple different plans, but what they can do, their AI tool does, is it has a Figma plugin. So if you have any designers who use Figma, it will generate semantic accessible responsive code from Figma designs. And it uses AI to do it. And in my playing with it, it's worked really well. I was surprised with how well it worked. Obviously, it's not perfect, but then I took that and then I put it into um, like it gave me like HTML and CSS markup, and I put it into GitHub Copilot, and I said, "All right, turn this into a Twig template," and it did that for me, which was really cool. So I think Builder.io is a good one, and then another one is DQ Dev. What is it called? DQ Axe Dev Tools, which it's a web accessibility testing toolkit, and it uses AI to power a lot of the things it discovers about the accessibility of your website. And it has a VS Code plugin, a browser plugin. It has manual and automated testing, various plans. But that's been another fun one because accessibility is a big deal. I think it's a big deal, and so being able to have these additional tools that will tell you more insights, not just like, "Hey, this isn't WCAG compliant," but it's like, "Here's what you have to do to fix it," has been helpful.
Yeah, I'm on the content side, um, so many great tools out there. Descript, I love Descript for editing audio and video. It's all transcript based, so you don't have to do like timeline anymore. You just like find the part of you cut off at one word, start at another word, and you can actually heal audio. So if the audio drops out, you can train the tool on a clean piece of audio, and then you can just type in the words that the person said, and it'll sync them up in their mouth movements, in their voice. So that's been super helpful. It'll force eye contact with the camera. So if someone's reading off a script, it'll force them to look look like they're looking at the camera. Um, we use Opus Clips and Kapwing are both tools for repurposing long form video. So it'll go through and find like the key points and cut those out, convert horizontal to vertical, do text overlays on them, and you've got social posts ready to go within minutes. And then another one that we're watching is HeyGen. So these text to avatar tools. So you train it on video of yourself, and then you can upload a transcript, and it will have you saying that in your voice naturally. I have a friend that has her entire online AI courses are all in, you know, an avatar of herself. She recorded the first module and then did the remaining modules with an avatar, and you cannot tell the difference. And then when she needs to update it because AI is changing so quickly, she just goes in and changes the transcript, and it changes. She doesn't have to reshoot or re-edit or anything like that. So yeah, and then like all the text to video tools that are coming, Sora and Veo and all of those are gonna be transformative in the way that online video is, generated and created, so,
What was the name of the Avatar one?
HeyGen, Heygen. There's another one called Synthesia that we're using to create training. So, basically, you can upload the entire, like, training script, and it will create an avatar, or you can train a avatar with a person. Since we're using it at the institution, we're using, like, generated avatars so that no one's digital persona is tied to, an avatar if they leave the institution or something. Um, and yeah, and then, it will generate the talking head, but it looks much more realistic than the old, like, animated looking talking heads that existed.
This question is for both of you. Uh, have either of you done any sort of adversarial testing for your AI integrations, like trying to break out of system prompts, trying to do prompt injection? Uh, have you guys done any security level testing for your integrations?
I mean, I've only done them on, um like, in a non-hacker, non-developer, type of way. So I'll go into our custom GPTs and ask it to share the training data or share the instructions with me. Um, and we're trying to set them up so that somebody can't just go and ask our tools how they were built and then go build their own versions, which we're not too concerned about. But, um just from the we are going to get to the point where we're using these sort of solutions more for our research and our clinical side, within our closed environment, and we don't want employees going in and grabbing the instructions out of those and sharing them or something like that. Um, so, I mean, we've played around with it a little, but we haven't done any, like, serious red teaming or hacking or really trying to bust the back end of the tools.
How about you, Mike?
Yeah. Yeah, same, only lightly, just because the way we're using our tools, mainly again with like GitHub Copilot. I'm not going to try to break Copilot. Um, but we're evaluating a lot of other ways to integrate AI into our website in the coming future, and that's one of the things we've talked about is what's our plan for testing these things before we implement them to make sure that people can't get bad results or break them and figure out the information we don't want them to have. And I find that hard to figure out how to test it because like when you build a component or you build something, you
Yep.
can do the testing steps like this is the expected result, this is not. But if you're using these generative AI tools, you can't be like this is exactly what it should say because it's going to say something different every time. So figuring out that test plan and how to get the bad results.
I watched a short video recently that talked about this, and it felt a little alarming because what they were talking about was like everybody that's a web developer knows about SQL injection, right? If you're in a CMS and you have a database backend. And the way to fix that is to tokenize it, right? You say, hey, this part is a token, it shouldn't be executed as a statement, right? But that distinction doesn't exist with LLMs. Everything is parsed, everything is set up. So I think it'll be important to I think it'll be important to keep this top of mind, how we can begin to protect against this because as it becomes more widespread, it's just gonna become more of an angle of attack.
One of the like, I think in some ways you maybe have both avoided the issue because it sounds like you're not doing a lot of exposing of LLMs to the general public. I know I was looking at one educational institute's website where they had launched a chat bot and it was completely accessible to the public. It was to find information from their website. And you could see they had tried to put some guardrails in place, but it only took me about three different prompts in a conversation to get the chatbot to start generating marketing copy for why I should not go to that university, why it was a bad choice as a student in 2025 to attend, and you should instead go to their rival. And like, I think there's things like that where it's like, from a cost standpoint, like when you start exposing this, then it means, you know, people might be able to use it and essentially get free access to LLMs. Either doesn't really harm you other than costs, or actually use it to develop, say, a marketing plan to go after your institution. Um, and I think I'd love to hear from each of you as you start to expose AI tools to the general public. Where you discover those sorts of issues or gaps end up needing to be dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, we're already looking at I mean, it's much easier to create negative marketing campaigns than it is to create positive
Yeah.
mar and people pay much more attention to them. We're already coming up with, like, crisis communications plans for when our, president is deepfaked or when one of our deans is deepfaked, 'cause
Mhm.
it's gonna happen. It's too easy to do that for it not to happen. So you have to have a plan in place, and it's gonna be the same thing when we start putting chatbots up on our site, which is going to happen. We're gonna do it. The cost savings and the advantage to students is huge. I mean, we're creating virtual, TAs for our business school already. At some point, those are gonna give bad answers, so we have to be prepared to, you know, take to be accountable for that and to say, "Yep, that happened, that was wrong, we're fixing it, we're training it," and we have to be monitoring the tools to see what sort of inputs are being, pushed out there so that we can, make sure that and usually what it is, usually it's the training data or the training content that's been given to those tools that was either outdated or inaccurate, and the tool is just returning what it was, fed in. So I think it's gonna make people much more aware of the state of their data and the state of their content when they start training these models on their entire digital landscape and it starts giving bad answers. So,
Mhm.
So bring the conversation back to Drupal a little bit. How does AI and Drupal impact EDU? And would you see EDU using a Drupal AI agent, for example?
I think that depends on the size of the EDU like Drupal team. And if you have a team or not, or if you've paid an agency to build your website and now you're the maintainers of it, I see like using the Drupal AI agent to help you navigate your admin side of things could be very helpful. Or one of the ways I'm looking at using it is for like there's the alt text image, the image alt text module as part of the Drupal AI ecosystem to ease that burden, because we want everything to be accessible. So to ease the burden on our editors from having to come up from scratch, descriptive images, alt text for our images, but to provide them a starting place with the AI providing, here's a default of what that image describes. Now tweak it for the context. So I see more of the accessible technologies in Drupal for with AI being built in to help the editor experience to ease that pressure on small teams.
yeah, I agree entirely. I think, the easiest integrations are gonna be those that are kind of, endemic to the workflows, and then we're even seeing, some people, like, currently when someone has to write an alt tag for an image, they have to take that image, they have to upload it to ChatGPT into our custom GPT. It'll write the alt tag, and then they'll have to copy that and paste that back into, the CMS. So just having a button that they can click within the CMS that says, create draft alt tag copy. meta descriptions. I mean, the meta description process, you have to point it at the web page after it's published. You have to go back into the CMS. And so I think it's going to smooth out those processes a lot. It's going to make it much easier for people to create accessible content. I think it's going to create better user experiences, especially when you look at like the search integration. So I think all of those like modules and tools being easy for developers to integrate, kind of being tested by the community so that when something goes wrong with the tool, everyone can kind of be aware of, what they need to change or fix. I think those are all fantastic opportunities for people to start using AI, who aren't already using it, because it's just a matter of time before we're all gonna be, using it and not paying attention to the fact that we're using it. We're just gonna be clicking the button that, generates some draft alt tag. We're not gonna be thinking about, this is the AI that's going out there and doing this for us. It's just part of the tool.
So maybe if we can keep it short as we're getting close to the top of the hour, where do you see AI going in the future?
One of the ways I see it going in the future, and I obviously have a narrow scope with development, but the rise of vibe coding, if anyone's practiced that, and I've done it for fun, but the idea that in the near future, like a faculty member can describe what they want their website to be and have it however good or bad it should be to be up there, and they don't need any input from, say, the development team to say those lens flares are a bad idea. That they can just describe it and it's created. That's good, and it's bad. It's troublesome for the future.
Yeah, I think it's gonna make governance much more difficult in
Yeah. Yeah.
situations. But, AI can be helping us with the governance. I think agents, the agentic AI, where instead of just automating specific tasks, you're automating complete workflows. I think those are gonna be very transformative when they finally get to a point where they're, actually useful and fairly easily integrated. Right now, they're still pretty clunky, the ones that I've played around with. Um, but I mean, in the next year, I think AI is gonna go through some dramatic, improvements that are gonna have serious impact on the way that we do so many things, especially in higher ed. I mean, from the teaching and the learning to the actual, you know, recruitment and, admissions, that the whole process, the whole marketing process. Um, Gonna see some pretty big changes, I think. So it's gonna be fascinating to see the impact on that. And then, if you really want to talk big scale, look at job impact and economic impact, and
Yeah,
um, you know, throw in robots and AR, VR, and going to be an interesting next few years for sure.
absolutely. Well, Brian and Mike, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure chatting about AI is, in a particular field in EDU. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been fun. Appreciate it.
Do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on the socials with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing Become a Patron. All right, Brian, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can go to brianwpiper.com or find me at Brian W. Piper on most of the social platforms.
And Mike, how about you?
You can find me at mike-miles.com or with the handle Mike Miles 86 all over the internet.
And Drew, how about you?
Yes, you can find me as Deviant Integral on Drupal.community and Drupal.org, and just straight up Andrew Barry on LinkedIn.
How about you, Martin?
Folks can find my website at manclue.com or they can reach me on all of the social channels as Manclue.
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, Nicxvan.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.